I wish everyone was able to get what they want so they could see that it's probably not what they want. But what often happens, if you get good at something and you're helping people, the thing that feels good and that you start to enjoy is the fact that you're helping people. Whether you're a photographer or a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher, that act of doing something for other people that is of value makes you feel like you matter, and then you want to do that over and over again.
This is the Voices of Learning podcast with AISB. Conversations around the skills and mindsets shaping the next generation. Hello, I'm Magdalen Gray, and this is the Voices of Learning podcast by the American International School of Budapest. This is a podcast for educators, parents, counsellors, and anyone guiding the next generation into an uncertain but deeply human future. Students today are growing up in a world that is shaped by artificial intelligence, by rapid technological change, economic uncertainty, and increasing pressure to perform. Many young people are asking deeper questions earlier than ever before. What kind of life do I actually want to live? Where do I matter? What does success actually mean? And yet most schools still focus primarily on grades, university admissions, and career preparation. But what if education also helps students explore meaning, contribution, purpose, relationships, and identity? In this episode, we explore one of the biggest questions facing education today. How do we prepare students not just for jobs, but for meaningful lives? We'll discuss why universities like Yale and Stanford are increasingly investing in courses about happiness, purpose, flourishing, and human connection, and why these conversations may need to begin much earlier than university. We'll also explore how these ideas inspired the Imperfect Art of Living course and the development of the Global Impact Diploma. This is an innovative, competency-based diploma which has been designed around agency, meaningful learning, and well-being. Today's guest is one of the many driving forces behind the Global Impact Diploma, an international initiative now reaching students across more than 30 schools. Based at AISB, Topf has spent his career reimagining what meaningful education can look like through experiential learning, with entrepreneurship, community engagement, and student agency. Before helping launch the GID, Corey worked in Peru, Guatemala, Costa Rica, and now here in Hungary. Corey, well.
Thank you, Magda. I'm excited to have this conversation.
At the moment, we're hearing more and more conversations around purpose, flourishing, and meaning in education. Why do you think that these conversations are becoming so important right now?
I think it's a combination of things happening externally that are forcing us to ask bigger questions, whether it's AI or 5-6 years ago when we had the global pandemic. People are forced to think more deeply about why are we here? How do we matter? What's most important? And I know during the pandemic, so many of us were forced to slow down. Mm-hmm. And when we finally had to slow down, big questions started to seep in. And one of those was, well, what's the purpose of the thing that I'm doing right now, whether it's school or work? And I think now with AI, potentially taking jobs and doing a lot of the things that we thought humans would always do, we're forced to ask that question again. Like, what is our role? What's most important for us as humans to do?
As AI and automation is impacting the future of work, and with the change that that's bringing, what do you think students need from education beyond academics?
Yeah, I think it's no longer enough to just focus on content and intellectual rigor. I think we need to ask a bigger question about how do we become better humans? And this isn't new. The Greeks often believed that you should not only build the intellect, but you should also build character. And so human flourishing was far more than just learning concepts and content. It was about what are you contributing to the community, who are you, and what are the things that make you come alive. And so we're, in a way, kind of going back to that after many years of just doing things that were easy to measure in schools. Now we're realizing we need to look deeper and say, what is it that makes us the most human? And how do we design for that in schools?
Mm-hmm. So how are we part of a healthy community and giving something, contributing something, and how does that impact our sense of purpose? So we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and I think it comes too from a lot of the studies that are being done on well-being and mental health. I just read something the other day that CDC did a study on high school students, and around 40% of students said they experience a high level of hopelessness frequently. And so if we have students that are dealing with mental health issues, they lack meaning and purpose in the things that they're doing. I think that's going to surface in the questions that they're asking and the things they say they need from us in schools.
And that's an increase in the amount of students of a certain age that are feeling that emotion from, say, 10 years ago or from pre-2009, pre-device ages. Do you see that connection directly linked to sort of digital use or citizenship or...
I think less do I see it. And the Disengaged Teen, that is a Jonathan Haidt book that just came out, they look at over the last 13, 14, 15 years, the increase in depression, anxiety, and just a sense of meaninglessness because of students spending so much time on their phones. And all of us, really. It's not just students.
So it does drain that feeling of meaning and purpose that we're talking about. So universities such as Yale and Stanford, and there are others, have been offering very popular courses on happiness and flourishing and belonging and kindness. And that's something that's been growing at a university level, certainly. What does that tell us about what young people are searching for in this current age?
I think it's telling that it's coming from some of the top universities because students are working so hard to get to Yale, Harvard, Cambridge, Oxford. And when they get there and they get to that pinnacle of success that they've always strived for, they're still asking, okay, but what's this for? Yes, I've achieved the thing that I've always wanted to achieve, but now what? And there's a great quote that I forget who it was, but it's along the lines of, I wish everyone was able to get what they want so they could see that it's probably not what they want. And oftentimes, if someone chooses an elite university for the right reasons because of a certain program or they see an opportunity to contribute there, fantastic. But I do think we're all stuck in a status game at times, and we see the next big thing and we just go after it. And once we get it, then we ask these big questions about, okay, why am I here and what is this all for? And these courses are often the most popular. Stanford, Designing Your Life, is an extremely popular course. At Yale, The Science of Well-Being is an extremely popular course because it gives students an opportunity to truly dive into, again, what it means to even be here and why. Yeah.
That's really interesting. And it brings me to one of the books that we'll be talking about that you often relate to in the as you've been designing the courses or helping to design the courses for the Global Impact Diploma. And one of them is a book by Daniel Coyle, Flourishing, where he talks about students often following the story that's been narrated for them rather than finding their own story. So the story of grades, of GPA, of meeting university expectations, getting to the university, and then that's very interesting that then it's on them to find out the why at that point, and it's not been shared with them through that story that's been dictated to them because they haven't written that story themselves. And that's something I see that you've been attempting to do with the Global Impact Diploma pathways, is to help students design their story coming from a point of meaning and a point of purpose and finding the purpose. Within that course offering, you've helped design the Imperfect Art of Living course, which you were telling me earlier has around 400 students currently.
Yeah, for next year with the 36 different Global Impact Diploma schools. It's one of the most popular courses that schools take on when they join the GID. And we have about 2/3 of the schools have shared their enrollment numbers currently, and that's already around 450 students will be taking the course.
In the second year of the program.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
it. Could you tell us a little bit about, like, in a nutshell, what that course aims to do, and also what inspired you to bring these particular questions into a high school education platform?
I'll start with the inspiration behind it. When we started the Innovation Academy in Lima, Peru, we had a cohort of around 15 students that began it. And during their second year, their senior year, they were asking really big questions about next steps as they go off to university. Where do I go? Why? What do I want to study? I'm going to lose my friends here, and I have to make new friends for the first time in a long time. And so what does this all mean? And because they had such a strong cohort and trust among them, they were asking these questions openly. And around that time, Designing Your Life from Stanford not only had their course, but they published a book. And it really looked at how to use design thinking to prototype changes you might want to make in your life. And so we thought, we use a lot of design thinking in the course. Let's read this book together, test it out, and ask some of these big questions, and then test some things we might want to do. And that then led to, they loved the course. We continued to iterate and adapt the course in different ways. And it started off, the first name of it was Iterating Through Life. And we then changed it to Imperfect Art of Living after getting some feedback from students and working with them on what should be at the core of the course and what do we call it. And the crux of the course, the big question is, how do we design meaningful lives in such an uncertain world? And then we use concepts and ideas from philosophy, psychology, literature, and really dig into what do we know from science and what do we know from philosophy over many, many years about what it means to truly live well, to be fulfilled, to find happiness and meaning together.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like it's also helping students to focus much more deeply on a topic which the study of philosophy does very well at a certain level, but bringing those together and having a proper, deep exploration of one's own identity and at that age must be very powerful. What are some impacts that you've already seen in maybe the first year of the course being launched officially on the students' lives?
Sure. One of the first projects we do is called Imperfect Connections, where students find somebody in their life that they want to deeply connect with or reconnect with or just show gratitude towards. And they have to use design thinking as a way to empathize with that person and see what it is that they would really want in our relationship, and what's the problem in the relationship. How do I contribute to the person? And so empathy is a huge piece of the design process and understanding the person. So we use that project to really build that skill. And then we have heard from students again and again that this helped me reconnect with my dad, who has been difficult to communicate with. There was one girl that, there's a teacher in Milan that shared the story of a girl who just became far more attuned to her sister because of the course and her ability to connect with her through it, and all kinds of stories through that. And then another project is Imperfect Stories. And students have to think of a pivotal moment or something that has really impacted their lives and tell that story live to their peers. And that as well has helped them reframe dysfunctional beliefs, understand who they are better. And it also, one of the things that storytelling does is it helps us inspire each other. And so when students tell stories to their classmates about something they've overcome or a person that has really impacted them, then it starts to inspire the entire class. And there's just a level of vulnerability too that allows students to connect really well. So those are some of the aspects, but students lead a lot of their own discussions in the Imperfect Art of Living. And just through that and having ongoing conversations and discussions with their peers, you see students really connect and open up about things that normally they might not.
I was going to say that opening up probably is like a life-changing for them, because it's, once you've experienced that, then the world's your oyster. You can just keep transferring that model of looking at relationships to every relationship that you have. And that must give them an edge or a superpower in being able to be relatable, to be able to understand others and be able to cross over when there's a hurdle in a relationship, to see past it, when often with the digital world at their hands, they can easily just skip to something more comfortable. So you're kind of having them stay with the messy, or stay with the difficult and the uncomfortable for long enough to see that it's worth working through, which is a very valuable experience for them, I'm sure. And no wonder it's so popular.
Hence the title, Imperfect Art of Living. It's a reminder that so much of what we do is initially imperfect as humans. And whether that's trying to connect with other people, conversations are imperfect, contributions to other people are often imperfect, but over the time, you build those connections, you build those contributions. And so, we talk a lot about vulnerability and the importance of vulnerability and imperfection in building those connections with other people.
It must be incredibly empowering for them.
That's fun.
They're fortunate to have that opportunity. I was wondering how you see, as universities have been following this path, how appropriate do you see for this age group to be wrestling with those kind of questions? Because some might think it's worth waiting a little bit longer, so there's a bit more life experience. But we're offering this now to a 16-year-old, so to have to question what does make their life meaningful, what kind of person do I want to become, how can I contribute? Why do you see that as appropriate, or when do you see that as kind of a right time?
I think the key that we always go back to is they're exploring. They're exploring these ideas. They're exploring purpose, rather than feeling like I've figured it out and now I know exactly for the rest of my life what I'm going to do or the people I'm going to connect with. It's really giving them an opportunity at a young age to explore these questions and to kind of lead these conversations, to start building that muscle of asking really, really important questions. It's not that we hope by 17 or 18 years old they've got it all figured out, because we are all becoming and learning and growing. But it's to start to build that muscle, because they're about to make a huge decision, which is, where do I want to go off to university, or what do I want to do for a gap year? And when I'm there, what do I want to study? So if we're not giving them space to ask these questions at 16, 17, 18 years old, then what is the framework that they're using to make these big decisions at 18 when they're going off to university? And oftentimes the stories that they're surrounded by are just stories of status. Elite universities, go get an internship at Amazon or Google or wherever, rather than stepping back and saying, well, is that really what I want? Or is that just what I'm told I want?
Because that's the story that's been expected of generations. And there's also that, I think in one of the books in Flourishing, they talk about he talks about the idea of purpose over meaning, passion over meaning, that often we're telling students, follow your passion, but passion is quite an internalized personal pathway, whereas meaning is more outward facing, more altruistic. It's more of a community based ecosystem mindset, which, as you said before, can help to promote a sense of happiness and a sense of fulfillment. Whereas maybe passion slightly less so, because you get to the end of fulfilling a passion and you may not have necessarily helped somebody or contributed. And I think those kind of questions, if presented at the right age, can make a dramatic alteration to a life path choice for the good, for the better. So
Absolutely.
Arguably probably the most important time, it seems, to be setting those questions is when they're deciding what next. So maybe we'll move on to meaning and the power of meaning, because obviously you've done a lot of work in that area, and you've looked at frameworks, and one of the frameworks that you often reference comes from the power of meaning, which identifies the 4 pillars of meaning. Could you briefly explain them to our listeners, and maybe also tell us why you think they matter for the young people today?
In Emily Esfahani Smith's book, The Power of Meaning, they look at again, philosophy, the science of well-being, what do all these things have in common when it comes to living a meaningful life? The first one, I'll ask you, what do you think 4 pillars might be?
4 pillars of meaning in life.
Uh-huh.
I would guess probably compassion to others, sort of supporting others, helping others. So contribution, possibly respect towards oneself, and respect and a connection to others, and probably a sense of contributing well.
Yeah, you've hit several of them. The first one, and probably the most important pillar of meaning, is belonging.
Belonging,
Feeling like you matter to other people and that they matter to you. And it's got to be both ways and reciprocal.
That's important.
Yeah, that it can't just be, I really value someone else. Other people have to show that I'm valued as well in that relationship. And it's not about quantity, but it is quality. And Harvard did a 75-year study of a group of people to see, well, what kept them alive longer, when they were flourishing, what did they all have in common? And it was social connections, strong social connections. Wow. And so belonging's huge. Purpose is the next one. Then storytelling and transcendence. And purpose is what you were talking about earlier about contributing. And that's why it's different from passion. Passion is more personal, and there's nothing wrong with having a hobby or a passion, but it's not a purpose until it contributes to someone else. And so the benefits of purpose, resilience, and motivation, all of that only comes from the fact that you feel like what you're doing is contributing to someone else. And then storytelling is interesting because, yes, it's the stories we tell each other, but it's also the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. And we spend a whole lot of time in our heads, and it's important to know how to recognize the thoughts we're telling ourselves and know how to reframe them. Because of our human nature, we have a very strong negativity bias, and it's a survival technique. But that negativity bias, when one bad thing happens throughout the day, that's the thing we hold on to. And so in the course, we really help students recognize that and say, all right, that's normal, I'm human, but I don't need to stick with that thought. I can reframe it. And so reframing our dysfunctional beliefs and the stories we tell ourselves is a huge piece of living a meaningful life, because if you have that skill, you're not going to sit in the negativity as long. And it's often one that students struggle with the most to understand, because it's transcendence. And it's the idea that we can let go of the self at times to experience moments of awe, or just be deeply present and appreciate the things that we're doing and savoring moments of our lives, because we spend so much time ruminating and rethinking things. That transcendence is having moments of just experiential awareness. And that has been proven to be huge. There's a beautiful book called Awe, and how moments being out in nature or just sitting and being, meditation, being present, all these things can be incredibly important for well-being.
And I know Dacher Keltner at Berkeley does a lot of work on awe as well, as part of their courses on the science of happiness, and talking about how just being in nature and to me, it's also the pillar which speaks to those who follow religious practices, where there's also deep contemplation in silence or prayer, or just that coming out of yourself, as you say, which, however we choose to do that, whatever we're comfortable with, gives us a break almost from the ruminating, and almost like a reset, which again seems to be another superpower to be able to help younger people equip the challenges, that sort of coping with the challenges of the world. I also feel we have a big strength in understanding that belonging features very strongly. We have a lot. Every school has a lot to do with making sure that every single student feels belonging. And I know that we're on a path with that now, with a multi-tier system of support, with making sure that students of all faiths or backgrounds feel the same sense of belonging. It's a constant journey. What I feel maybe we could focus more on, and there's parts of it in different areas of a student's experience, is the transcendence, maybe.
Yeah, I think belonging, without question. I think if you ask students what they remember most and love most about their schooling, it's often comes down to friends and the collaborations and connections they've made with teachers and everything. Storytelling is interesting because I work with students on telling stories, being articulate. I do wonder about the stories we tell students about success and achievement.
Right.
And by the time they leave, are the stories healthy that they're telling themselves about themselves? And yeah, with transcendence, I agree. That's an area of work, I think, in all schools, just because we spend so much time inside. But I think sometimes students have moments of awe when they get inspired by their peers, when there's a new idea that they hadn't thought about in a class. But I think, purpose, storytelling, transcendence, all areas that we could probably do better.
And with the awe and with transit, there's a lot of benefits in being in nature with that. And I think we're extremely fortunate with such beautiful natural surroundings, and we do try and do that. And I see the difference when we put kids in nature. When high schoolers have just come back from their experiential learning trips out in nature, and they seem transformed to me in that short time, just because they were device free and they were really outside and they had to make things work in nature that they're not used to. And I also see it in classes like photography, where they're doing macro photography and they're spending time looking at one leaf or a plant, and it helps them to look more deeply and more focused into the area. But it's also making that connection more thoughtfully, maybe knowing that that's what they're experiencing and articulating it and making that conscious connection that can help them see it maybe in other scenarios in their life, and actively look for it as well as a way of balancing their well-being.
Because I'm going to guess in most classes, people aren't talking about transcendence and the value and importance of it. Yeah. William Damon from Stanford has done 2 decades of research on adolescent pro-social purpose. And it really comes down to 2 things. That one, it's a long-term thing. Yes, you can change purpose from time to time, but it can't be, week by week, I'm just changing my purpose. So it has to be long-term, and it has to be something that contributes to others. And so it doesn't have to be a job. Being a parent can be a very, very important purpose in life. And sometimes I think the easiest way to think about purpose, because it can be a heavy term, is contribution. So What is something you feel like you want to contribute to long-term and that is of value to others? And that's why it's so important to help kids think about, what are you great at? And what are your strengths? What do you still want to enjoy doing it? But what often happens, if you get good at something and you're helping people, the thing that feels good and that you start to enjoy is the fact that you're helping people, whether you're a photographer or a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher. That act of doing something for other people that is of value makes you feel like you matter, and then you want to do that over and over again.
Which is a very a very interesting neurological response to helping us survive well. That we're getting the sort of positive trigger from contributive behavior, from positive service behavior. So it's helping us to help others more continuously because of the feeling we're getting, which is encouraging about how we're made up.
We're wired. Exactly. Yeah, we're wired to want to contribute. And a lot of the issues with mental health right now is the fact that day in, day out, students are going to school, they're doing work, but they may not always feel like they matter in their community. And Jennifer Wallace has a book, it's titled Mattering. And one of the things that psychologists and psychiatrists are doing is, when students are feeling this depression and anxiety and loneliness, the first thing they're starting to recommend is go find a way to get involved and help others, because that outward focus begins to help the inward narrative that we've been telling ourselves.
That's really interesting. And I recently heard Simon Sinek talking on a podcast. I think it was the Diary of a CEO podcast. He was talking about how if he has someone coming to him in trouble, he'll tell them first to go and help someone else who's in similar trouble, because that's the easiest way for them to pull themselves out of a rut.
100%.
So it speaks to that, obviously, sort of deeper wisdom around why.
Yeah. And that's the danger of right now, the sometimes the well-being movement and the self-care movement. It can also, sometimes we think that means, oh, go get a massage or just go, take time for yourself and be on your own. And sometimes that's important, but a lot of the times what we need is actually to feel part of a community and that we're contributing to that community. Yeah.
So what we might do instead of that massage is go and help an elderly neighbor mow their lawn or something, or shop for somebody who might be sick, or make it, and that
100%.
might give us the other feeling. And which is why international schools like ours, many schools have really embedded service learning as part of the curriculum, so that students understand that. And we see the transformation of our Senegal trip, our Ceylon trip to Romania. The children come back from that transformed, and they understand why we help. That.
Well, that just real quick, that goes back to what you asked earlier about what are the pillars of meaning that our schools do well. Although I think we have a lot of room for growth in terms of purpose and helping kids feel like they matter. Clubs are a great example. Even sports, if I feel like I'm an important contributor to my team and then I feel part of that. So that can be a huge benefit. I just think you mentioned service learning. So much of that mattering often happens outside of the curriculum. So how do we bring that into the curriculum so students feel I'm not only learning important content and concepts, but I'm also contributing to the community? Yeah.
Which is why the IB, why the JEDI bring it into the learning more and more, because it's such a core part. It's something that would have been seen on the periphery, but actually is one of the more important parts. And I think that sort of speaks for the spirit of what you've been doing with the Global Impact Home, and kind of disrupting that old school style of what comes first.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I wonder if you can give me some differences in terminology. It would certainly help me, and I hope our listeners understand some of the concepts you've been talking about. So what would you say is the difference between purpose, passion, vocation, and calling? So all of those seem to be used quite interchangeably, but purpose, passion, vocation, and calling.
Like we talked about earlier, purpose is more outward facing. Passion tends to be inward facing. When it comes to vocation, that's work-based, but purpose can be something you do without work. So AI taking our jobs could take our vocations, but doesn't necessarily have to take purpose, because we can still contribute in different ways. If I am really creative, okay, how can I still be creative and contribute to people's lives? Because they're going to need art still. I might not get paid for it, but is it really the money if there's universal basic income? Or is it really what I do that for is, one, just the intrinsic building and creating, and then sharing that with others is also purposeful. And then when it comes to calling, I think that's perhaps the pinnacle of all this, that you feel like you're doing something that aligns with all aspects of who you are and what the world needs, and purpose and everything. And ikigai is a Japanese concept that looks at that. Like, what can I get paid for? What does the world need? What am I great at? And what do I love? I think are the four things that ikigai looks at. Yeah.
That's very interesting. It also makes me think of the historian Rutger Bregman's moral ambition, and looking at how we can contribute meaningfully and help the world, but also give what we've got and find within that our purpose. So there's a lot of connections in the space that's talking around this. And
so you take a class, and that can be giving students opportunity to lead certain things, whether it's as simple as leading a discussion rather than a teacher always doing it. Because the student comes in with a very different frame of mind if they have to think about what questions am I going to ask? How am I going to engage everyone? So now I matter at a whole different level with my peers than if I'm just sitting through a lecture. And then you take it to another level, and like right now we have students running businesses. And so one's called Sitters 101, and they're leading a business for babysitters. And so they're mattering to parents, but they're also mattering to high school students that want to become babysitters. And then we have a leadership course where students get to learn what it means to be a leader and do small initiatives. Like one was showing gratitude to our workers and finding small ways to show gratitude to them and knowing what that's like. So, there's simple ways in the classroom, and then there's bigger ways in the community that we can continue to do that. Most schools are going to tout the IB diploma scores. They're going to share university acceptances. And sometimes that can send the message that your worth is tied to that outcome rather than your worth being tied to who you are in general and the things that you've contributed to our campus. I do think receiving awards at the end of the year, oftentimes it's a small number of students who win several awards, and they're often about a grade. Kudos to our school. We now have a contribution award in each class. One of our learning identities is contribution. And so we're really trying to change that language, but it's not graded. And so with grades, students think that's the thing that they need to achieve and strive for, because then universities are looking at that one metric oftentimes. And so it's deep and challenging, but I think there are steps we're taking as a school to try to improve that.
And help the students sort of write the story of what their success would look like based on what their sense of purpose is and meaning. And I think we're on an exciting path, but it seems like there's quite a long way to go, because you've got to make sure the universities also understand that change. And it seems so far that's a positive dialogue wherever it happens. And so the world is changing, but it's a big vehicle to change. Yes. So it's very uplifting to see it happening in the steps that it does here.
Yeah, because going back to stories, we have a lot of old stories about school and what it means. And to change that narrative is extremely hard. Yeah, but not impossible.
Not impossible.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a couple more questions, and then we'll go for a break. And I'd love to talk about the GID a little bit with you before we finish. So many schools focus quite heavily on individual achievement, as we've just been talking about. How can we create these environments? How can we help facilitate the change, or a more kind of more rapid change where contribution, collaboration, and human connection matter just as much as those awards and that individual achievement?
I think we looked at areas where students are already thriving and flourishing in clubs and sports and some of those activities. What do they have in common? Oftentimes they are team-based. So a classroom where it's more team-based, and those teams might stay together for longer, and that there's a high level of agency and student leadership and ownership of the things that they're doing. Again, our clubs are often student-led. Our teams, the coach can't get in and play. It's the students, the players, the athletes have to play themselves. And so providing those spaces where students are leading, where they're in teams and working together, and then there's some type of authentic problem they're trying to solve, and then finding ways to weave in important skills and concepts and dispositions throughout. I think that's what makes a learning environment an area where students can flourish and truly find meaning in what they're doing.
You're listening to the Voices of Learning podcast by the faculty here at AISB. If you like what you're hearing, and you're new to international schools or new to AISB, please book a visit and you can connect with us through our admissions office to learn more by emailing admissions@aisb.hu. So welcome back. Corey, much of the ideas and the thinking that we've been discussing correlates very directly with the philosophy of the Global Impact Diploma, the GID. Could you explain to our listeners what that diploma actually looks like and how it connects with some of the core principles that we've been describing in our conversation?
Yeah, I mean, the beautiful aspect of the GID is the way it has come to be. For years, so many of our schools, AISB included, have had bespoke programs that are built in-house. We had the Innovation Diploma. There's been the Innovation Academy in Peru. There's a Quest Academy in Singapore. There's so many schools that have done innovative work trying to help kids do more project-based learning where they're contributing. The challenge is the sustainability of that in our international schools, of people leaving and just feeling like you're an island on your own. And so really the way the GID has been built is a group of people and schools coming together saying, well, how do we take everything we're learning about human flourishing and well-being and design courses and a diploma that answers that? And let's do it collaboratively, even if it's messy, like Dan Coyle talks about in his book, Flourishing. Even if it's messy, let's do it together because it's far more meaningful, and we'll come out with a better product with all these brilliant people giving their ideas and building it with their hands. And so really at the crux of it is we want students to take what they're learning and contribute. And that can be through our Collaboration for Impact courses. There are 2 of them, Imperfect Art of Living and the Entrepreneurship for Impact course. Or we have 2 Agency for Impact courses where students are driving a lot of it in the Impact Project and the Internship for Impact. And we have a Leadership for Impact course. So again, a lot of them are team-based. All of them challenge students to contribute in positive, meaningful ways, and all of them give students a lot of agency and ownership over the things that they do, so that they're more motivated and persistent and resilient. In most schools, because it's easy to teach and easy to grade, we focus a lot on knowledge and content and concepts, which are incredibly important. The difference with the competency is you look at knowledge, skills, and dispositions. And if I were to ask you again, if you think about schools, which of those 3, knowledge, skills, dispositions, do you think we could do a much better job of addressing, designing for, and assessing?
Probably dispositions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you take a disposition, like someone who is driven, all right, why are you driven? How did you become so motivated and engaged? And what are those things? That's a disposition that in order to get at, it takes a lot of transformative work of reflecting and doing hard things and being resilient. And we often don't design for that. And we often don't give feedback or assess that. And so then students really don't know, where am I at? How often do we assess empathy and build those skills and help students understand, well, how do I become more empathetic? Yeah. In the entrepreneurship course, there's another school in Lima, FDR, that's doing it. And so there's a group of students that are designing a clothing brand and different articles of clothing that help to raise awareness about Shipibo artists in the Amazon rainforest. And so they've taken those designs and they've put them on bags and different T-shirts and things like that to really raise awareness about the art, and then also help the artists in the Amazon through funding and just awareness and support. And so I get to see their LinkedIn posts. This group has started to share what they're doing. And again, it's team-based. They're contributing to something beyond themselves. And the level of motivation and engagement is so powerful and so great to see.
Wow, yeah, that's a really great example of sort of service, the impact, the contribution, but also they're using a lot of skill sets that you would need in a real life work environment.
Can I share one more too?
Please do, yes.
We had, again, one of the courses, Internship for Impact, and we had students from Milan, Bucharest, and Budapest all go to Fashion Week, and they did their internship together. And to see them go and connect with each other, collaborate, and help with Fashion Week because they were behind the scenes on the Saturday was really cool too.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that maybe ties into one of the questions I had about the impact you're seeing on these experiences and students, not just academically, but what are you seeing in those students that's changing them personally?
I think they're starting to see where they come alive. What are the things that wake them up and excite them? And so we get to see that. We also get to see a deeper level of self-awareness because they're doing oftentimes really hard things that are brand new and uncertain. And so it's building that really positive humility and self-awareness that, hey, this is maybe harder than I thought, but I see the value in it and I want to push through and do it because it matters. I think it was the World Economic Forum that just recently put out what are the skills for 2025 and then what are 2030, what are the things that students need? And at the top, adaptability, resilience. I think one of them was leadership and social influence. And so much of this is, being adaptable for a world that is rapidly changing. It's being able to lead and contribute. And so I think we know in schools we need to do a better job of some of these things. While I think another one of the skills was analytical thinking.
Right.
And we do a phenomenal job of that through the IB diploma, through our regular AISB courses, through the GID of getting kids to question, to be critical thinkers. And so some of that we're already doing and constantly working. But I think when you ask yourself, what would a university want? If you put yourself in the admissions position, what type of student is the university going to want to come to their campus? And you think backwards like that, they're going to want somebody who knows who they are, how they want to contribute, that they've done things that matter, that they're engaged and driven, and that they're going to come to our campus and be a integral part of this community.
And a contributor.
And a contributor, exactly. Yeah.
Beautiful way to close that conversation. Obviously, there's more information around the GID online, and you've also talked about it in various forums. So anybody who's interested can find out more, and I'm sure you'll be happy to connect also with any schools that are interested in starting along that path. And that group is growing exponentially as well, which is a very good sign. I just to finish, I have a couple of quick controversial questions. This should just take a couple of minutes. So a quick fire. And then we'll have to finish, unfortunately, because I think there's lots more to talk about. But it's given us some books to read and some ideas to ponder further. So I'll start with following your passion. Do you think that's good advice or dangerous?
I think you should follow strengths and contributions. And once you see that you're having an impact, that will make you passionate about the thing that you're doing. So definitely be engaged, but first find out what is that thing that people need and that you're good at. Because if you satisfy that need, you're going to be passionate about it.
Okay, my next question is, does AI make traditional career planning less relevant?
I think it makes it a lot harder. I think students still need to ask the big questions, but I think some of those questions now are changing and becoming harder. And so I think now it's less about the vocation and it's more about purpose and contribution, like we've talked about.
Right.
Yeah.
Are we preparing students for specific jobs or more for adaptability?
Adaptability. 100%.
Is it appropriate to ask children what they want to be when they grow up?
It's better to ask what do you want to do or what problems do you want to solve.
What problems do you want to solve?
Sorry.
Good.
This is rapid fire.
Yeah. Can grades unintentionally damage identity and self-worth?
Yes.
Right. How do we teach students not to over-rely on external validation in systems built around evaluation?
Give them something that is more intrinsic, and that will then ideally outweigh the extrinsic.
Intrinsic. Should personal finance, investing, and life design become core parts of education?
100%. I think other things matter, but if students don't leave with an awareness of how to design their lives, then I think we've failed a little bit.
Shortchange them.
Mm-hmm.
Is success becoming less about status and more about contribution?
I hope so.
Good. If you could redesign one thing about modern education tomorrow, what would that be?
That we would give students more opportunities to be out in the community, giving to the community.
Beautiful way to finish. Unfortunately, this is all we've had time for. Thank you, Corey, and thank you all for watching and listening. To get more than a sneak peek of the topic that we've been covering today, please do follow us on our social media channels, reach out to us. And if you have any ideas, comments, and thoughts about what we could cover next, please do reach out to us. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.